Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Regine and I love creating content all about how we can raise our self-awareness to elevate our lives. So if that sounds like something that you're interested in, stick around and let's get into today's video. Okay, so we all know what it's like, right? When something bad happens, a negative situation, we've all had that experience and it doesn't feel good. I had one of those days yesterday. Somebody basically ruined my day by asking me a series of very probing personal questions about my hair. I've changed my hair recently. If you've watched my channel before, you'll know. And so this person essentially interrogated me with a series of probing questions about my hair. But my issue was that it definitely had a racial undertone to it. These questions, the way that they were asked. And as you can imagine, it wasn't a nice experience. And I felt totally robbed of the good mood that I was in. I was in a great mood until this happened. So in true Regine fashion, I started analyzing this situation. Once the questions were over, I kind of took myself away and I was trying to process what had happened. So I was thinking, how can I make myself feel better? I literally felt awful and I really wanted to change that. The questions themselves and that whole situation was already uncomfortable, but I was also then aggrieved that I felt awful afterwards. It was over technically, but I was still feeling very uncomfortable, very uneasy. And so I was replaying the situation, thinking about it and thinking, okay, how can I help myself to feel better in this situation? And I have essentially come up with 3 reframes that you can apply when you find yourself in this kind of situation. Small inconveniences to big traumatic events. They are applicable to any situation. Now, obviously, depending on what it is, you may not be ready to do something like this straight away. And so it may be that you wait a while, but I think these are very transferable tips and ways of managing these kinds of things because we all go through them. And it's a great way to shift your energy from feeling victimized to actually feeling empowered. And in some cases, even feeling grateful for this misfortune or this negative situation that has happened. Okay, so like I said, the point of this really is to shift your energy, right? We can't help what has happened. Often these things are out of our control. And so we're only able to respond to it, right? We're only able to take the steps once it's happened. If somebody says something or does something to us, or, we experience grief or loss, we're going to react to that. We will have an emotional response to that and we will feel something. That's inevitable. We can't get rid of that. And so the next best thing that we can do is try to process those emotions in a healthy way. The first step is actually working through the emotions. In the example that I am using with the questions that this person was asking me yesterday, the emotions that I started feeling was I really felt almost like a freak show because this person was probing me with all of these questions about, my hair and really made me feel as though I was strange for not having Caucasian hair. And so I really started to feel uncomfortable. And if I'm honest, as we're touching on race and racial trauma, as you can imagine, there were lots of emotions, many layers to this. So I was feeling a lot of, like I said, I had to take myself away and try to process these emotions. This person was just incessant, like they just would not stop. And by the end of it, I literally felt humiliated, like the manner in which this was done. This wasn't a private conversation, first of all. And so I just felt completely exposed. I felt naked and humiliated by the end of this. And so as you can imagine, there was a lot to process. There was a lot to contend with in terms of how I was feeling and all of the emotions that this brought up for me. This is not unique to me. This is not unique to this situation. Whenever negative things happen to us in life, whenever things impact us in a negative way, we will have emotional responses. And it's really important to process those emotions in a healthy way Otherwise, they stay within our energetic field. And I believe that the body stores energy. You can read about this, you can research this. If we don't process our emotions, we are suppressing those feelings and they stay within our energetic field and they impact us. So they affect our aura, they affect our mood, they affect how we feel. Even if this is months or years later, these things accumulate and they have an effect on the lightness with which we operate. They affect our vibration. They affect so much. So a good example of this is, people who have suffered lots of trauma, for instance, may struggle to manifest things as easily as people who haven't, because, they have to clear all of these layers before they even get to that base layer of just being high vibe, And so when we suppress those emotions, that's why we may have a underlying feeling of sadness, negativity, heaviness, even exhaustion. We physically feel the emotions that we carry. So that's why it's important to process these emotions. Like I said, I'm a big believer in that our body does store these emotions. And if this is something that is persistent, not only will we see this affecting our mood and our energy, this can also manifest as physical ailments, as disease, because there is so much dis-ease in the body. We all know that a huge factor in a lot of illnesses is stress. And that is because when our bodies are under such stress, whether it is physical stress or emotional stress, we are not designed to sustain that for a long time. And if we continue to hold on to those emotions without releasing them, the body gets to a point where it can no longer cope, and then you start to see physical manifestations, you start to become ill, you start to deteriorate. So we really have to process and release these emotions so that they are out of our energetic field. And if you look in the animal kingdom, for instance, animals do this intuitively. If you observe animals, you will notice that whenever they experience trauma, they will naturally shake themselves, for instance. That is a way of releasing emotion. They are literally releasing that trauma, releasing that memory, releasing that from their field, and then they carry on. But as human beings, sometimes we're not as good at doing that. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples. Some of these things I applied yesterday to help myself process, but you can find what works for you. So for instance, there are things like EFT tapping, that's emotional freedom technique. This is one of my favorites. This is something that I used yesterday just to move the energy through my body and out of my body. If you'd like me to do a video talking more in detail about ways of processing emotions, releasing emotions, let me know down in the comments. But other things that you could do, journaling, taking your thoughts and your emotions out of your head and putting them on paper. The idea is to release, like I said, these emotions from your being. So move them out and put them somewhere else. So taking them from your mind, putting them on paper is a great way of doing that. You can also talk to a friend, a family member, a therapist. Breath work. I love breath work. The breath and breath work is really good for regulating the nervous system. So when we have experienced something that is traumatic or something that is heavy or negative, often, we can feel anxious or we can feel all sorts of things. And so it's really important and it can be really helpful to regulate our breathing, and that helps to calm the whole body down. That helps to reset the body. So that's another great thing that we can use. Crying is also a great way of releasing emotions. People think that crying is a sign of weakness. I actually think it's a sign of strength because it's a way of releasing that emotion. And if that emotion leaves you, it leaves you in a more empowered position. There are also somatic workouts that we can do to release energy. There's like energy healing, even dancing, exercise, movement. Literally moving the body is a great way just to move energy. We need to mobilize that energy because the energy is trapped within our field. And so even going for a walk, exercising, moving that energy, it physically removes it from your being, from your energetic field, and it allows you to feel lighter. It allows you to feel freer. And so any of these kinds of activities is a really healthy way of releasing that energy. Even screaming into a pillow, punching a pillow, like I mentioned before, shaking, and it's a really healthy way of processing your emotions. So I've talked about really healthy ways of processing the emotions. The not so healthy ways are binge watching TV, scrolling on social media, binge eating, anything that is going to cause us to feel numb and to suppress our emotions and to avoid feeling the emotions because, of course, they feel uncomfortable. Often, our instinct tells us to do something that's comfortable, do something that kind of soothes us. And that's fine. Do that, but don't do it to numb yourself. You still need to feel those emotions. And by feeling them, you also free yourself because you allow them to pass through you. And so they're no longer a part of you, and you don't need to carry those emotions with you. And, this is all part of your self care. So this might seem like a lot of work, or why should I have to do this? But essentially, the person who has caused you to feel this way, it's likely that they have continued with their day. I'm pretty sure this person who completely disrupted my day yesterday just continued enjoying his day. And I was left for several hours feeling really upset. And, just it brought up a lot of unpleasant, uncomfortable feelings for me. And so it's then my responsibility to myself to find a way to process those emotions and to free myself from that, because I don't deserve that and you don't deserve that. If something bad happens, it's our responsibility to try to regulate ourselves again, to try to get back to a place where we're feeling good and to feel our best. Okay, so something else that I forgot to mention as I was talking about things that we perhaps shouldn't do to numb ourselves rather than process our emotions is obviously drowning our sorrows, numbing ourselves with alcohol or any other substance for that matter. It's obviously not the healthiest way to process anything bad that has happened. Okay, so once we have processed our emotions, so like I said, I have 3 tips for you. And the first one is processing the emotions. But what do you do once you have processed the emotions? So I am a firm believer that anything that happens in life, good or bad, I think is an opportunity for us to learn. I think these things happen to give us that opportunity to learn. And I think that there is a lesson in every situation. So that could be perceived as a good lesson, or it could be something that helps us going forward. So the way that I would do this is I would ask myself, what can I learn from this situation? What is this experience trying to teach me? What can I take from this? What did I do perhaps to contribute to this situation? Could I have done something differently in order to prevent it? That really gets us to almost remove ourselves from the situation and look at it from a bird's eye perspective and be unbiased and just be impartial and just observe, learn what there is to learn. Is this a pattern in my life? Has this happened before? Has something similar happened before? Sometimes we think that we're experiencing different things, but actually we're experiencing the same thing just in a different form because we haven't learned the lesson that we needed to learn. And so it keeps coming up. It's persistent. It comes in different ways. Say relationships, for instance, and we keep having similar problems in these different relationships. And it's because we haven't learned the lesson. It's a different person, it's a different face, but it's the same lesson. And so we really have to take that lesson in order to overcome, to heal, to grow, and to move on to a place where that is no longer something that we will encounter because we're not an energetic match for that. So I was thinking about this after I had that situation yesterday. And one thing I realized is that I need to have stronger boundaries. I need to be more protective of my energy. I essentially allowed someone enough space, enough authority, enough room to completely disrupt my energy, completely ruin my evening, and have such a negative impact on me. And I realized that had I had stronger boundaries, had I stopped that conversation, once I started feeling uncomfortable, it wouldn't have progressed. And so the problem wouldn't have escalated. I could have stopped it in its tracks and the effect on me would have been less. It also gave me the opportunity to reflect on things that make me feel safe versus things that make me feel unsafe. Environments that I perhaps don't want to be in the future, people I don't want to be around. It really made me think about how will I vet my friends going forward? How will I vet my future partner going forward? Essentially making sure they don't have some of these qualities that this person was displaying yesterday, because that situation and that experience made me feel very unsafe. So that was my experience, but for you, it might be different. So maybe you are grieving, maybe you have experienced loss, and the lesson that you can take from it is that life is incredibly fragile. Life is so short. And so maybe it's making you want to make the most of all the time that you have. Or maybe it's that you find your job really boring or really frustrating. And whilst that's not nice, whilst that's uncomfortable, there is still a lesson in that. And maybe it gives you the opportunity to actually change your career, embark on something that, you find inspiring, you find fulfilling. And had you not had that experience of being bored, being frustrated and unfulfilled, you wouldn't have been made aware that actually you wanted something different. And so there is this polarity in the world. These bad things happen. We can't stop bad things from happening. We can't stop negative emotions. But the good thing is that there is polarity. So you can't have bad without also having good. In every bad situation, there is also some good. There is something, if you're willing to look hard enough, if you're willing to dive deep enough, look hard enough, there is always something that you can take from that situation. And there is always a lesson. There is always something that you can use to your benefit. There is always something that you can take in order to restore your power from that situation, feel empowered, release that victim mindset, and really take something positive. Now, I know this might be hard to accept, particularly if we're talking about things like grief, but you cannot have negative without also having positive. It's all relative. And so if you're able to experience anything that feels bad, you are also able to experience things that feel good, because you would not be able to identify bad unless you were able to measure it against something that is good, right? It may not be immediate, but there is always a flip side. There is always something that we can take from even the worst situations. And so if you are committed and you are willing to look for the good, even in these bad situations, and take something from it that, maybe it's not positive in the moment, but maybe years later or something, you can reflect and you can say, wow, I really learned this lesson, which I then took and carried with me in my life. This horrible event that happened to me really changed the trajectory of my life, and I became a better person as a result. There is always that opportunity, and we always have that choice to look for the lesson, to look for something good, to look for something positive, even in these most dire situations. Okay, so this last point follows on nicely from the point I was just making, and this one I like to call "Don't get mad, get paid." Now, this is all about how you can eventually become grateful for this misfortune or even benefit from this misfortune. So, like I touched on before, things happen, they're out of our control, but we can definitely put a positive spin on things and even profit from these things. So, how could you do this? Think about it. This thing that happened to you, is this something that maybe many people experience? Is this something that through the lessons that you have learned, you could share with somebody else, help others heal through similar things? I'm doing this right now. I had a terrible experience yesterday, and I decided to reframe that. I decided to spin that and benefit from it, because I'm now creating content about it, and this will serve other people. I'm not alone in this experience. Loads of people go through this. And so I am taking the experience that I had, the lessons that I learned, and I'm passing that on. I'm sharing it so that others can benefit. That's a way of me taking my power back. So could you create something valuable? Could you create content? Could you create a course? Could you create anything? Think about Kylie Jenner, for instance. Kylie Jenner had a lot of insecurities about the size of her lips, right? So this was a negative thing that was happening to her, something she didn't like, something that was out of her control at the time. But she decided to put a positive spin on that. She decided to get paid for that, and she created a lip kit. She created a business out of it that ended up earning her millions and amassing fame and all of these things. This was perhaps her biggest insecurity at the time, and she profited from this. There are lots of people who have incredibly traumatic lives, who go through unthinkable things, and they write books about it, and these books sell and make them lots of money, and they are able to in some way benefit from the negative experiences that they've had. And it's almost like good karma. There's always balance in the universe. I believe that there is always balance. Think about Risa Tisa, who had this whole series on TikTok. She went through all of these things in her relationship, and then she decided to spin it. She decided to tell her story, and I'm sure she was able to monetize that story and to benefit from it it in some way, it doesn't take away from the experience, but it allows you to move forward in a positive way, reclaim your power, and it allows you to dictate the narrative. So when these things happen to us, often I think we feel that that is a full stop and that's just how life is. But no, this isn't necessarily the end. We can continue the story. This could just be the end of one paragraph. We have the opportunity to completely change this narrative and make it something that is actually useful for us, make it something that is beneficial for us and actually serves us. And so again, it's that idea of moving from feeling victimized to feeling empowered and eventually benefiting from this situation. I think that is the ultimate conscious up level, when you are able to reframe even the worst situations and create something positive from that. And that's what we're all about on this channel. So I hope you found something useful in this story. I hope you were able to take something beneficial from it, take some insights from it, and take some tips that you can apply in your own life whenever these things happen, as they do to all of us. So thank you so much for watching. If you haven't yet subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe. I love creating content all about how you can raise your self-awareness to elevate your life, and I also sprinkle in vlogs here and there. So go ahead, hit the subscribe button and join the family, and I will see you in my next video.